Howard.
Thank you. I have 100 things to say. I'm going to say just one. It's my understanding that governments are formed to see to the health and safety of their constituents. Am I correct?
Correct.
Therefore, I, as a senior citizen, am very much concerned about this. Simply, it says air pollutants from cars linked to pneumonia in citizens, senior citizens. Air pollutants from cars linked to pneumonia in senior citizens. I take that personally. I'm a senior citizen. My sister is in the hospital with pneumonia. She's my older sister. The air quality in Toronto endangers our health. If we can't take a breath of fresh air, all other talk about anything is useless. The first thing is a breath of fresh air, which is why I'm running for mayor, on a breath of fresh air. We're entitled to it, I want it, and I'm going to get it if I have to sue every level of government because of the abrogation of their responsibility to my health, your health. The violation of the contract that governments make with us has been done in this city on the provincial level, on the municipal level, and on the federal level. They are culpable and liable, and I am going to be launching a class action suit to make sure that I get a breath of fresh air. And if anybody here is with me on a breath of fresh air, talk to me afterwards. I'd like to know from, well, we have two great panelists here, Elizabeth May and Natalie. Am I entitled to a breath of fresh air legally?
The issues I mentioned earlier are not just about, as if it's a just planetary survival, not that small issue of whether we live or not on this planet past the next 100 years, but the more immediate question of the rise in respiratory attacks that hospitalize Torontonians on a routine basis on the hot, smoggy days largely because of our energy systems. So you're entitled to it. Whether you can get it in law or not, we can get it politically. We just have to demand the change we need to see. And good for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Money is the life's blood of a modern economic system. And there's been a struggle for hundreds of years over who is to control the money system, the creation of money. And in Canada in 1935, we made some considerable progress in this struggle when, under public pressure, our Prime Minister, then Lyon Mackenzie King, nationalized our central bank. We own the Bank of Canada, and its custodian is the Canadian government. Now, when Mackenzie King nationalized our central bank, he said this: once a nation parts with control of its currency and credit, it matters not who makes that nation's laws. Usury, once in control, will wreck any nation until the control of currency and credit is restored to government and recognized as its most conspicuous and sacred responsibility. All talk of the sovereignty of Parliament and of democracy is idle and futile. Now, since then, successful governments have abdicated that responsibility and converted it into a privilege for private banks. So the government, who could, through the Bank of Canada, create its own money, and until the early 70s, created at least 20% of the new money supply, instead allows the banks, private banks, to create money and then to determine interest, and then we pay the interest. We buy into a debt money system that enslaves everybody in the country they live in here and in most other countries of the world. And the end product of that process is what's going on in Greece right now. No political party, with the exception of perhaps Paul Hellier's fledgling Canadian Action Party, has taken the trouble to educate at least its own members to the truth about money and to the options, because we do have options. At the end of every discussion of every issue, we come to the stone wall. There's no money, we can't afford it. That is not true. We can afford what we want to afford, but we must control our money supply. Until political parties show people what their options are, they don't have any. Can you explain to me why no political party at this point in this predicament is doing that?
Well, I can speculate about the others, and you're quite right. The Canadian Action Party, Paul Hellyer largely founded his party on the issue of monetary policy reform. The Greens actually are having a policy convention taking place in this city on August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Our policies are generated through our membership. And we had simply not had, I mean, I happen to be very familiar with the arguments you're making, and my personal views are known on this, but the party had not, through its members, ever had a policy. So there will be a debate and a vote at the Green Party convention here in Toronto, August 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and we may well be the first one other than CAP that takes that position. But that's going to be determined by the membership, and fairly soon. And you're all invited to attend. Just join the party soon, and you can show up and vote.
Somewhere along the line, all of the opposition has to get to know the fact that you can't wake this media up. They are bought and sold. They are there to do a job. They are as controlled as the press was in the old Soviet Union. And the only way out of this impasse is to create a new national opposition media of record, which will be mass circulated, well done, and well developed, produced, have good production values, I think they call it, at several levels, both on the web, and print form and so on, whatever can be afforded. Until that is done, we will continue to lose battle after battle after battle, because it's the only way you can get the real issues across to a large portion, not just of the broad public, but of the informed, the expression intelligentsia. When are you going to do this? When are you going to start to pick up the whole issue of an opposition media? Because until you do that, the political parties are a waste of time. Well, not quite, but they're largely a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, I'll just quickly say that I couldn't agree with you more that one of the things that I missed largely with the 17 years I spent as executive director of Sierra Club of Canada was the damage being done to the fabric of democracy from the concentration of media. But when I was in an election campaign as leader of a federal political party and watching the impact of a controlled media, so that the vertical integration, so that CTV Globe Media controlled so much of what people heard and saw during an election campaign, and then another chunk was run by CanWest Global, and then very, very little did CBC still have to communicate to us in English Canada, and then they're terrified of having all their funding cut. So a critical piece of democracy is to break up corporate concentration, large media holdings. We did a press release destined not to be covered by corporate media, calling for the opportunity that now exists as the creditors are forcing the sale of the CanWest newspaper empire. We said, let's break it up. Let's have the papers sold to different small holdings across the country. Let's give the Victoria Times columnist to someone in BC who wants to run a decent newspaper. Let them buy it. Let someone else buy the Calgary Herald. Let someone else buy the Edmonton Journal. I mean, this is 27 major national newspapers that are run provincially and some, in the case of National Post, and they're all being sold as a block to maintain that corporate concentration. We need to break it up. It's toxic to democracy. When we have access to the information we need to make informed decisions, when we don't have a debate in Parliament about the right of Parliament to see documents relating to how Canadian soldiers were ordered, it's not about saying Canadian soldiers did anything wrong, their orders were to hand over detainees. These kinds of issues go to the root of who we are as a people, and we're not allowed the information, even parliamentarians. So that's the parliamentary crisis that we're in right now over that issue. But an informed, effective, engaged citizenry holds all these evils at bay, and it's something that you're doing really well. So it's the traditional problem of the preacher preaching to the choir while the people who didn't show up represent the empty pews. So I'm not going to harass you about it. But we really do need to focus on the elements of effective citizenship and make sure that we have the information we want and take the media to task when they're providing useless, celebrity-driven drivel in place of substantive media coverage of what's happening in our world.